Christian Parenting.
Welcome to the Called to Love podcast, where we discuss all things adoption and foster care and dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical perspectives to help you and your family thrive. I'm Summer Colbert, adopted mom, director of adoption and foster ministry, and champion for the Arkansas Baptist Children and Family Ministries. Adoption and foster care aren't just a process. They are both unique invitations to go on a journey with the Lord, where you will experience life-changing opportunities to grow in your faith and learn to love in an entirely new way. One thing is for sure, being called to love means you will never be the same.
Hey, Called to Love families. Well, I don't know about you, but summer is in full swing at my house with camps and sports and all the things. And in the midst of it all, we're trying to find moments as a family and with each of our kids individually, as life just doesn't stop because we're on summer break. It's something that I've learned in recent years as an adoptive parent is that disruption to routine or schedule can actually create some discomfort in our kids, and that can manifest through some really challenging behaviors. So, that being said, I felt like this month was a great time to revisit my mindful parenting series with my good friend Kelly Hamilton from earlier this year. So, for the next 4 weeks, I want to dive into a little bit of a refresher on attachment and mindfulness, and together lean in at how we can be attuned to our kiddos in the midst of a not so normal routine. And I want to cap off the month with a little update from our family and some lessons that we've learned in putting these principles into practice at our house, the good, the bad, and the, I don't want to say ugly, but let's just say opportunities for growth. So, without further ado, here is Mindful Parenting with Kelly Hamilton. Welcome back, sweet families, to Called to Love. And I hope that you have really been enjoying our new series so far on mindful parenting. And my guest, Kelly Hamilton, is joining me again for part 2 of this series. Kelly, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so you led beautifully into our next point in our conversation and in this series, which is a key component to, I believe, successful parenting in general, but especially successful parenting as foster and adoptive parents, and that is attachment. And so today I want to dive deeper into the attachment styles and how they affect our parenting, how they affect us, being able to identify our own attachment style, and then diving into our children's attachment styles and just how we can thrive in our relationships despite maybe differences in our attachment styles. And so let's begin with an overview and understanding of attachment, Kelly. I think that's a great place for us to start.
Yeah. So attachment is the emotional connection formed between child and caregiver in early childhood. And really, what we see is that this connection influences how future attachment and relationships are established. A securely attached person, an individual, will leave a relationship feeling seen, soothed, safe, and secure. There are 4 different types of attachment styles. We have secure, we have anxious, avoidant, and then disorganized. And disorganized is a little bit a combo of anxious and avoidant attachment.
Yes. And I learned so much being able to unpack each one of these individually. And so I feel like that's going to be valuable for us as we go through this series. But let's stay a little bit 30,000-foot view before we kind of dive deep into how can understanding our own attachment style benefit us just relationally and then as a parent.
This is huge. And I think this is kind of a miscomponent in our training pre foster care, pre adoption placement. Because really, how we engage and interact with our kids is stems from our personal attachment styles.
Right.
And so when we don't understand where we are responding from, how we are engaging, we can oftentimes miss the mark of formulating a secure attachment with our kids.
Yes.
And so I think being mindful of where is our attachment, what what is our attachment style, can really lead us to say, hey, I think I need to do some work in formulating a secure attachment myself in order that I can securely attach to my child and vice versa. Because
Yeah.
really, attachment goes both ways.
Right.
Oftentimes we can feel like we're attached to our child, but maybe our child isn't attached to us. Or
Yeah.
maybe our child is formulating an attachment to us, but we are not attaching to them.
Mhm.
It's a both and. And I think oftentimes when we're becoming, when we're training to be foster parents or training to be adoptive parents, we hear a lot about attachment, but we don't really dive into what is it, how does it form, and what is our personal attachment style in order
Yes.
that we can better understand how to securely attach to our kids.
That's a really great point. And as you're saying this, the thought just popped in my head. And I feel like we need to say this because, again, I feel like I needed to understand this. All these things that I'm learning on the other side of this, adoption journey that I so wish that I knew when I was getting started. But is attachment a one time action or is it ongoing?
It's such a good and important question. Attachment is not a one time event. It is honestly a lifelong commitment
Yeah.
in pursuing a healthy, secure relationship with your kids.
Mm,
Oftentimes, when I work with families and say, okay, talk to me about your attachment, I will hear, like, oh, yeah, first time I saw them, we totally attached. Or we attached in the hotel after we, or for international families. The first time we picked them up and we came back to the hotel, we were totally attached.
yeah.
Um, it's not a one-time event.
Yeah.
It is a lifelong commitment of pursuing a healthy relationship, a healthy connection with that child.
Yes. Okay. That's a really, really great point. Because you do, I think, and again, I tell on myself a lot on this show because hopefully it gives voice to maybe something that
Mhm.
people are afraid to say. So I'm like, I'll tell on myself. It's fine. But, I had this hallmark idea of what adoption was gonna be like, and it was gonna be magical, and there was gonna be the big airport arrival scenes, and there were gonna be balloons and confetti, and, somehow there was magically gonna be music playing in the background, and then the credits were gonna roll, and it was gonna be this happily ever after stroll, into the rest of our lives. And, I mean, the opposite was definitely true for me, and it was a real smack to my whole idea of what adoption was going to be. And so that hindered my attachment because my
Mhm.
expectations weren't met on the
Yes.
front end. And then I have this sweet little baby who just needs to feel safe and comforted and loved. And her attachment style was completely different than mine. And I didn't understand my own attachment style, which we're going to dive into this. I'm more avoidant, and she smothered me. So you can imagine
Mm,
that was a recipe for disaster. And
right.
so with that, I mean, do you want to dive in a little bit to understanding and maybe identifying our kids' attachment styles as well as our own? Or because I want to leave enough time for us to unpack the individual styles, but I feel like, again, this overarching conversation about attachment might be helpful first.
Yeah. I think you hit on a huge and such an important piece right there of I thought it was going to be the balloons and the confetti and the hallmark moment, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like when we, and I'm going to include myself in this, when we as foster and adoptive families and parents place ourselves in the middle of the story, we are setting ourselves up for failure
Yeah. Yeah.
because the expectations are not realistic, and honestly, we're not the center of the story.
That's
Like
right.
we are just here to serve not just a child, but I'm going to challenge and say we're here to serve a family because
Yes.
that child does not come in isolation. That child has a family.
That's right.
And so that may look different in how in different situations, but when our expectation is skewed and misaligned to really serve ourselves and not serving others, then yes, we are definitely going to be disappointed, frustrated, and feeling like, where do I start?
Right.
Because the reality is not matching with the dream I had.
That's right.
And so I think that's a really important point. I know that's not where we're going with attachment, but I think you hit on that, and I think that's so important for all of us, myself included, to remember on this parenting journey of it's not about us.
Yes.
Oh man, that hurts.
Hey, sweet friend, do you have questions about adoption and foster care? This podcast is meant to be a resource for you to help you in this calling, which can be full of so many unknowns. We want to answer your questions, which is why in the show notes you'll find Summer's email, which is summercolbert@gmail.com, where you can submit your questions to Summer and let us know if we can share your questions or story here on the podcast, so other listeners can know that they aren't alone in their wondering and experiences. Again, that email is SOMERCOLBERT@gmail.com, or use the link below. You are not alone in this journey, sweet friend. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
It does, because I mean, in fairness, I mean, let's give ourselves a little bit of credit here. Like we do fall in love with children that we've never met yet. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
there's this idea of a child, and God places that in us for a reason, to prepare our hearts to love the child that He has ordained for our families. But it's not going to look like, because look, I'm a sinful human and that child is a sinful human. And so we're going to hurt each other. We're going to struggle. We're going to wrestle in relationship, and we're going to have to do the work, as you've beautifully said,
Yeah.
to maintain attachment and connection and facilitate healthy relationship. But we have this idea of just love, and it's overwhelming, and it's fed by others, people who really don't understand the trenches of this calling. They see it as very pretty, and they almost kind of attach this, and you and I've kind of touched on this a little bit in conversation before we hit record today, that it's this idea of saving children.
Mm.
And so that can be really unhealthy for us as parents going into this idea of attaching with our children, if we have that even lingering slightly in our minds, that we're going in to save a child rather than just love and steward a child, right, Kelly?
Yes, I think that's so important. I think when we or our community or anybody places the parent in the role of hero or savior or rescuer,
Yeah.
that becomes so dangerous, because if you're a Christian, we have one savior. And it's
Yeah.
definitely not us.
Right.
But in that place, if we say, oh, we're rescuing, or oh, we are the hero in the story, the hero and the rescuer don't need work. They have it all together.
That's right.
And that is not us. We
No.
don't have it all together. We have to do some work.
Yeah.
And it also places the child in the place of needing the saving,
Yeah.
in the sense of, like, we are here to make you better. And no, I don't think so. I think we are here to parent well, to love, to help you heal from trauma. But I think it's also important for us, when we see these behaviors, to make sure we understand they're coming from a place of trauma.
Yeah.
And not all behaviors are sinful.
Yeah.
And you can edit that out if you don't want to.
No.
But I think I think that's important for us to understand, is that often the traumatic behaviors are a response to feeling afraid, to
Yeah.
feeling unsafe.
Yes.
So our responsibility as parents is to build an environment that is regulating and that is safe,
Yeah.
and that the child can heal in
Yeah.
that space. And healing is painful. Healing is hard. It's not going to look pretty.
That's right.
And so it is important for us, I think, to get back to attachment styles. If we
Yeah.
haven't done our own healing
Yeah.
in our personal attachment style, in our personal story, our own trauma, our own unmet needs
Yeah.
are going to come out sideways
Yeah.
when we're
Absolutely.
triggered.
It's so true, and that's why it's cyclical. Like, it all ties together. And talking, as we're going through this series, talking about mindfulness, and then talking about attachment, and then to your point, we don't need to add any extra pressure to ourselves or to our children, because the first thing that's going to do is hinder attachment,
100%. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's the last thing we want to do. And so how can we free ourselves of that? I mean, we may be years into this adoptive parent journey thing. I mean, myself, I'm a decade in, at this point, and I'm just now figuring and having like these aha moments, and I'm like, oh, so I think that you don't have to necessarily have learned this on the front end. For those of you who are listening and you're at the beginning of your journey, and you're have the benefit of hearing what Kelly and I didn't know when we were, going through this, or you may be right alongside with us where you're like, yeah, I'm 5, 10, 20 years into this thing. It's never too late to
Yes.
understand attachment and to understand the importance of it and where we need to begin with all of this, right, Kelly?
Yes, 100%. It is never too late. Even if your kids are out of the home and are grown adults, it is never too late. And it is always an opportunity to come back and say, man, I learned something. I really wish I had known this.
Mm,
And if out of my hurt, I caused hurt, I am so sorry.
yeah.
That wasn't about you. That was mine. I own that. I mean, what an opportunity to show our kids how to repair a ruptured relationship. We
Yes.
are going to mess up. I
That's
mean, 100%. We are just going to because we are human beings.
right.
But man, we have the opportunity to come back and repair those relationships and say, I am sorry. I did this. I own that. That was me. I apologize. I'm going to work to make that right,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, along those lines, let's unpack that idea of because you're right. There's constant reconciliation that's going on in a lifelong relationship, and as you've defined this lifelong commitment to attachment, and being in relationship with somebody, give us just some basic steps to work towards either establishing healthy attachment or healing from broken attachment.
For ourselves?
Yes, and just
Okay.
in a relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with us. So I think one, we talked about mindfulness last week, and
Mhm.
I think it's so important that when we are mindful, when we are aware of the present moment and can say, okay, here's the situation. Why am I responding this way?
Yeah.
So, for example, if we are in a moment that, is kind of annoying, but we are raging inside, like
Mm,
where's that anger coming from?
yeah.
And we have this sense in us to just shut down
Mhm.
and to not acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Okay, man, I'm really avoiding. Why am I avoiding? Why is that my default here? When
Yeah.
we're mindful, we can pinpoint the reasons of why we are responding the way we are.
Yeah.
And when we can understand where we're getting our response from, then we can do the work to transition into secure attachment styles or
Mm,
secure attachment behavior. So if in that scenario say, okay, I am so angry, but all I want to do is shut down, avoid it, stuff it, put it somewhere else. If I'm mindful, I can be aware of like, okay, that's my default, that's what I want, but I'm going to push in to this really uncomfortable feeling.
yeah.
I'm
That's
going
good.
to push in and be like, hey, I'm angry. I'm a little upset right now. I need a break, but I'm going to come back in 5 minutes. And can we talk about it then?
Yeah.
We're able to identify why we're responding the way we are.
Yeah.
We're able to identify what we need in order to move to a secure attached behavior. And then we're able to ask for what we need.
Mm,
And so I think that's really where we have to start is that mindfulness of why we respond the way we do.
yeah.
Is it secure attached behavior? And if it's not, how do we pivot?
Yeah.
And it takes time.
Mhm.
And often it takes also professional help.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, I think that was one of the best things that my husband and I can do is lean on professionals to be like, I need someone to help me walk through these very murky waters because this is new. This is all brand new. So I need some guidance. And I think that's very important for us to say, man, I need to do my own work and I need someone to help me.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. And we're going to dive into the next episode. We're going to go very specific and we're going to go through each of the attachment styles. But for the moment, I want to ask this question as we're closing out. Um, when you identify your attachment style, is that always your attachment style?
Ooh, such a good question. No, it's not. I think one of the things that we learn is even in our foster and adoptive parent training is hey, the brain is moldable, right? It can heal itself, it can create new neural pathways. The same is for attachment style for a child
Mhm.
that, we say, hey, if they can attach to you, they can attach to others.
Yeah.
The same thing goes for us is that we can retrain our brains to operate and respond out of a securely attached place.
Mm, that's
Now, it may have a default in times of dysregulation, we're probably going to default to, the old habits, right?
Right.
But when we are mindful and when we have practiced with repetition, just like the same thing we tell our kids, right? Then we can learn these new behaviors and move into it in a different attachment style for sure.
Okay. That's helpful and hopeful for people like me because I will beat myself up when I go to
Mm.
that default, when I'm dysregulated or when I, whatever that might be. So that's really, really encouraging. Listeners, I hope that's helpful for you as well. Kelly, this is so helpful just to kind of have this overview conversation, I feel like, of attachment. And I want to ask one last question on this line of thinking to kind of get us in the framework as we dive, specifically into these attachment styles. Remind us of the benefits of healthy attachment.
I think that's so good. One, I think when we have a healthy, secure attachment, each person is able to express their need
Mhm.
and know that that need is going to be seen as valuable, worthy, and met.
Yeah.
They can express any emotion that they may have without fear of a rupture in the relationship.
Yeah.
They can um, trust easier. They can celebrate more. We can really kind of move in that relationship without fear that it's going to fall apart.
Mm.
You know,
That's so good. And that's what our kids need. Again, that is a core felt need for all of us as
yes.
individuals, but certainly for our adoptive and foster kiddos is that my loved one, my caregiver, my person that I depend on is not going to leave, and that there is nothing that I can do to break that. Yes, we may have to do some work. There may be some things that hinder and disrupt, but that is going to remain. And that is the way that the Heavenly Father parents us.
Yeah.
And so that is the way that we want to model healthy parenting and healthy attachment for our children. Beautiful way to land that, Kelly. I love that. Listeners, come back next week as we are going to dive into specifics and the 4 attachment styles. Thank you so much for listening today. And thank you so much, Kelly, for your insight in this topic.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.